This is Dyslexic Design Thinking. For the past 25 years, Gil Gershoni has been the head of his own branding agency, Gershoni Creative. And one of the things he's passionate about rebranding is his dyslexia. In this series, Gil sits down with members of the dyslexic community for eye-opening conversations about the intersection of dyslexia and creativity, and what dyslexia can teach us about ourselves and the world around us. Today, Gil talks to David Taffet, a parallel entrepreneur, executive whisperer, and photographer. Enjoy.
Welcome, David.
Hey, thank you for having me, Gil.
It's great to have you on the show. It's interesting because you're kind of like a split screen aspect to your career. On one hand, you have a background in law, also experience with building companies. And on the other hand, you're a brilliant photographer. Who is the real David?
He's still emerging. He's a very curious, tenacious, resilient person. It sort of defies definition. And in fact, I tease that if you try to connect the dots of how I became where I am and take it out and project to where I'm going to go, you'll have no idea how it happened. I don't know for sure. I just know I'm open to all of it.
Mm. What was it about then, the world of law, that really interested you in the beginning?
A sense of justice, a belief that if you're armed with a knowledge of the law, a passion for people, and advocacy for making things right, that you could do it. Unfortunately, I found that the law changes based on politics, that people sometimes have agendas that go beyond what you thought would have been a civil rights interest, and you can't always accomplish what you hope to do. And then, most importantly, I didn't like most of the people on the law side of it, not the client side of it.
Mm-hmm. Last month, you published an article in Fast Company about the topic that is a very key component of dyslexic design thinking, which is the beginner's mind. I often give talks about how to think like a dyslexic, and part of the key component of it is how to embrace the beginner's mind. For folks out there that maybe are not familiar with that idea, can you explain to us what is beginner's mind to you and how did it impact your career?
Yeah, I can tell you what the opposite is first, because I think that's a good way for people to appreciate what something is not. Is an expert is someone who knows more and more about less and less. A beginner's mind starts with the concept that you know nothing, but that you're open to everything. And what makes it wonderful is that you approach things with a openness to awe, where you're willing to be surprised. Not always in a good way. Sometimes you'll see things that are upsetting. Sometimes you'll see connections that you would prefer not to have recognized. Often, though, you'll come at something with, isn't that a wondrous thing that I got to recognize? And had I come with a preconceived notion, I never would have seen it that way. So the beginner gets to wake up every day with just a delight in, I wonder what will unfold for me today.
I love that. What's some of the techniques or habit that you focus on in order to evoke that kind of openness?
I have a few. One really begins with humility. And humility for me has two prongs. One is it's not about me. I'm only part of this. We spend a lot of our life thinking that our sense of self and the way we describe our lives, my life, I, puts us in a place where we forget it's not about us. And the second part of humility is knowing that even in those instances where you can't escape that somehow this is affecting me, it's at some level about me, I'm small in the concept of flow. And there are only a few things that I can control. So I ought to be very aware of how things are passing, what it means in the context of a larger picture. How is it affecting those around me? Because if I stay focused only on me, I'm going to be out of kilter with the rest of the world.
When you work in your career, where did you find applying that sort of beginner's mind most impactful for you?
Mostly in problem solving and in creative pivots. So on the problem solving side, I will generally find myself in a room with people. I believe in solving things working in teams, where there will be subject matter experts. There's going to be people that have had this experience before, And they're going to bring something that's really essential as the building blocks for appreciating where we sit. What is our context? What might we expect? What should we see if things are working? But I find that if you rely on those people alone and don't embrace your own lack of knowledge and openness to what may be despite what they think, that you're only going to repeat what they always did. And you're always only going to achieve what they already achieved. But if you come at it with that perspective of, I am informed, I am listening, I am accepting all of these inputs, but I'm also recognizing dots that you don't because you're fixated in the way you've always been. I see dots you don't, and I don't call it out. I just stay open for it to see it, and then I will ask questions. If indeed what you said is true, why are we here? And if indeed that worked before, then why hasn't it already worked now? But it's really because I'm asking innocent questions. I'm not trying to manipulate. I'm really trying to shake people out of that perspective that we already know to come to a place where we really need to be prepared for what we're about to know. And by doing that and helping people see dots they wouldn't otherwise see, we're able to solve a problem. And when we come to an end, and sometimes a pivot requires that you hit something and you have to pivot, if you try to go back at it again, you're bumping up against a wall. But if you allow for the fact that there's a creative avenue with all that you have, just start with a different mindset, a world set, a beginner's mind all over again, you'll often see a path that wouldn't otherwise have been visible to you.
Wow, I love what you just said. It's something that's very natural to me as a dyslexic, because as a dyslexic, I see letters, these symbols, as negotiable. And because I see them as negotiable, it often is very challenging to read because I see those letters and my mind manipulates them in a whole universe of thoughts and ideas. You take the same part of it and you apply it to practically anything else. And all of a sudden, you were seeing it for the first time again, and you're able to see it from a different angle and perspective and turn around and see through the inside, above, and below all at the same time. And that's really kind of the beginner's mind philosophy of see it for the first time. Be astonished with things that we take for granted because we don't look at them for the first time again. Because when you do, then you find different avenues, different ways to collaborate that brings brand new insights to old problems.
You know, there's another part of it that's highly personal, which I think, though, for anyone listening is something they should take to heart. If you really can bring a beginner's mind to every part of your life, you're going to wake up in love with your wife or your significant other, depending upon who you're with. But I do every morning wake up and try to see my wife not as the familiar Christy I know, but as Christy I get to wake up to anew. And I bring that to every part of my day as best I can. Of course, we all have our own issues and things that distract us and obligate us to get a little moody. But when I'm in that great place, oh my God, it's a joyous place.
That's beautiful. You know, as I was researching you, I realized, you refer to yourself as a parallel entrepreneur, an executive whisperer, and a turnaround specialist. All great title, by the way. I loved each one of those. What was the first company that you really built into success or helped turn around?
My biggest success from a world's view of where you've done something that the world would applaud, right? So that generally means that you had a financial exit, it was significant, and that you built something from nothing into something that became bigger than you once you sold it, which is not how I define success, but I understand it as a measure of success, was Meridian Telesis. And this was a company that started as what was about to be an abject failure. I had entered into a space that was doing broadcasting of media, internet-related services at a time where connectivity wasn't great. It was hard to do broadcasting. And I chose as a partner a company called Internet, where they were solving the bandwidth issues, but the individuals on their sales side were loving my opportunities and deciding to take them. And it would have been the end of a very large investment. I went to meet with the head of global sales. His name is Bob Giannissi, and described what was happening to our company as a result of bad actors on their side. And he laughed and he goes, well, that's salespeople and that's just the way it works. And I was like, I'm going to end up without a company. He goes, sounds like we got a lot of business. And he's teasing me, but it was serious. And rather than stopping right there and recognizing that I had a beginner's mindset. And I said, I want to ask you, tell me about how you're going to roll out your new business. What are your pain points? Where are you looking to grow? What do you need in those geographies? And how is it that you're going to meet them? Or why aren't you already meeting them? And as Confluence would have it, they needed a co-location facility in Philadelphia. And Philadelphia happened to be my hometown. I've never heard of co-location in my life. The only word I understood in his sentence was facility, which I understood was a building. He told me that they needed to build a building, but they didn't want it on their balance sheet. They needed an outside player to do it. To make the longer story very short, I said, I will build it to your specs. I will build it to your time frame. All I want is a contract that says the day we open, we're profitable. Give me that contract and I will raise all the money I need to raise. And I will also want to reserve floor space for us to go build our own business. They signed it on the spot. I raised the money, built the facility, and then sold it after a number of years, cash flow positive to a public company, and it was a sensational exit out of what would have been a really devastating end to my first iteration before the pivot on the spot.
Wow. I love the way of looking at something that can look as an end, a problem, an obstacle, and as a dyslexic and looking at the beginner's mind mentality to say, okay, what do I do with it? Where is a way to go that's maybe not so apparent to the eye? And then not only finding successes, but, be able to sell it and profit from it as well. I know you're leading a company right now investing in the world's first germ-freezing and zero-odor waste bin. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, the name of the company is Pedal, and we're not just investing in it. We actually own all of the intellectual property rights in it. And it's a company that we launched just before the pandemic, which we thought would have been in our favor if you want to make something good out of something horrible. If there's ever a time we're going to worry about germs, it should be during the pandemic. And on the one side, we were correct about that. There was tremendous interest, really quick interest in having us manufacture and distribute this product that has the ability to take consumables that have been touching your body, biological consumables like incontinence products, feminine hygiene products, diapers, but also organic waste or medical waste, and then isolate it so that the germs can't grow. There is no rot, so there is no stink. And because there's no stink, it's invisible to pests. No roaches, no flies, and rats. It was a genius invention. And in fact, the way we describe it so the world understands it is imagine if your freezer and your trash can had a genius baby, it would be a Pedal. And we had gotten all the way up to a pre-sale with tremendous pre-sale interest and sales coming in. And all at once, when the vaccine came out, the entire world shifted its focus from a manufacturing perspective, shipping perspective, logistics perspective, and on the cost for social media direct to consumer. And our costs went up 10x. Literally on Friday, the 13th in November of 2020, it was over in a heartbeat. And we had to put our company on pause. 2.5, 3 years later, 7 weeks ago, we got a call from Mass Challenge asking us to participate in a P&G sponsored competition to present to them to be a partner with an eye to building a $1 billion brand. And Christy and I, just this Tuesday, presented to executives in the US, Europe, and Asia our perspective on how Pedal should be in the world, how P&G can make that happen. And we're now at a place where I've been given a playlist about patience, because we have to wait 2 to 3 weeks to find out if we were successful. And I'm not very patient. I may have a lot of other strengths, but dyslexia did not give me that one.
That's exciting. And I think that sounds like an amazing product. I've seen it on a beautiful website. I've seen the visual, the design of it. And it makes so much sense. I love your, if a refrigerator, freezer, and a garbage can had a genius baby. I love that. It's a beautiful product. It makes a lot of sense. I know that you also are an amazing photographer. Is photography been a passion of yours most of your life, or how did you come? Did it come later in life? How did you get into photography?
I actually started picking up a camera and doing jobs and starting to build small businesses at 8, both in the same year. The businesses at the time were essentially taking on tasks for money and then getting other people to help me and paying them a little bit of my money, which helped me start to understand how to work with and through people. But the photography side started in Taiwan, and we had moved there. My mother's second husband was a fighter pilot. Like my first father was also a fighter pilot, but he was killed in Vietnam. And our dad had taken us on his flight path to Taiwan. So we're now in this foreign place. And I find that I really love people and I have a natural way of connecting with people. And I wanted to memorialize those connections. And it was something I understood even as a very young child. And I've carried a camera with me my entire life. In fact, it's sitting over here. This one is named Annie Oakley. It's my newest camera, and it's always a larger camera with the large lens. I don't try to be discreet. In fact, my perspective is if I have to sneak a shot, I won't take it. I wait for tacit approval that people see I have a camera. They allow me into their environment. And then when I become invisible and I can see people operate as if I were no longer there, thus my moniker, Invisible Man Photography, I will start to take pictures and really capture people and connect with their lives and help them see themselves in ways that they've never been seen before. Mm-hmm. And I consider it a privilege to get to do it. And if I am good, I appreciate it because it's really a testament to the people I get to photograph. I feel very good about that.
So interesting. One of the things that when we talk about dyslexic design thinking is the idea that, and I think a lot of dyslexic I talk with kind of mention a lot of things you're saying is you're in it, but you can actually for some reason not be of it. Meaning you can kind of see both the bigger picture, the details, how different actions in different parts of the equation will affect each other, which is a nonlinear thinking skill. And then how to kind of almost be voyeur or seeing the conditions and the actors and the subjects and the objects and be able to sort of support them, as you were saying so well, as a mentor for the greater good of the collective effort. So I think that's, it's one of those things when you look at the disability of dyslexia versus the hyperability of dyslexia. These are the same sides of the same conversation, but depends how you lean on those gifts and skills gives you that immense ability to be so profoundly successful or, in whatever you do.
I wanted to draw one more thing that might be helpful is that you asked about the title Executive Whisperer, and it probably conveys a picture, but I don't know if it really conveys how much impact you can have in that role. Back to back 2 years now, I've helped behind the scenes. No one even knows I exist. Multiple executives who were in tough places orchestrate the exit of the toxicity at the top. And to do that, I'm mentoring through and with the person that I am engaged with to help them lead within an organization and up to a board, to communicate as clearly as they can, hold the ground as strongly as they can, and to execute with excellence where I can do nothing other than use my words, my calm, and my compassion and conviction to help them through it. And it's the greatest strength of invisibility because I'm not a puppeteer. It's not like I can literally go and do these things.
Right.
I have to bring the people to it. They have to own it for themselves. And then they have to go out and get people to galvanize around them and execute. And I think that's the height of invisibility. And I love it.
Mm-hmm. I see so many parallels in our different worlds, as we look at branding and try to find the sort of truth of that individual, company, product, global nonprofits, whatever it is. The exercise of the rebrand is to make everybody involved understand the transformation so they don't need a manual. They can make their decisions thereafter because they viscerally understand why are we shifting? Why are we creating? Why are we choosing versus not? The action, values, behavior, product, execution, so they can steer their organization with a lot of clarity without, and it sounds as the executive whisperer, there's a lot of similarities that you're almost showing together so they can steer it on their own, but they know where it's coming from. And I think that is something that, do you think that it's something that's common to dyslexics? Do you think that's something that has to do with the dyslexia thinking gift?
I do. I think that it goes to that lack of ownership. Like, you appreciate your agency. You work in a world where you already have some limitations. You become very adept at moving through the world to get to where you are with really concrete handicaps. And once you've gotten there and have recognized that you still have become the full you with whatever you don't have and do have, it becomes so much easier to help others almost selflessly, even though it's almost like a payback, because it's like, I understand what it's like not to know. I would have loved for someone to have told me early on what was going on and to help me out and the rest. And so I look at it more as like, I don't subscribe to those cultures that, well, I was hurt, therefore I'm going to hurt you. Mine's the opposite. I believe in delivering just the antithesis of that to other people. And I find that it lifts me. And I think that comes from a dyslexic history, not so much from what are the known strengths and weaknesses of dyslexia, but the experience of being dyslexic.
Right. I can definitely hear the compassion there because, you can kind of recognize our own sort of paths and challenges and, being seen or labeled in different times of your life as maybe less than, right? And I think a lot of it too has allowed me to be able to look with so much empathy and listen to the other side with my whole body, not just with my ears, and be able to read their body language, their gesturing, their choices of not the words, but what the word stands for, in order to be able to guide, to mentor, to support, to sort of help in the process make better than it is, or help show the way that sort of is with more ease.
I rely on the same thing. And in fact, when I have conversations and adjusting to virtual as opposed to being in the room, because there's a palpable feeling that I'm sure you get, that I know I get, that I can feel the room. Mm-hmm. And I've had to adjust because now I've been operating for over 3 years virtually. I watch every blink of your eye, every breath, every micro statement you make with your mouth. I can feel when you're leaning forward or backwards. I hear how your voice goes. And it's at such a level, it's almost exhausting, yet it's exhilarating at the same time, because I know without your words what you are feeling. And that guides me much more than the words that are used. Often, because words from a dyslexic perspective, especially if they're in writing or coming from another, are not as powerful as where are you with this? And that's really what I focus on.
Yeah. When I was looking at your website, your photography, you seem to focus often on marginalized communities and population outside the U.S. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I try to go to a place where I am the foreigner. And in every way, it goes back to a beginner's mindset. If I go to what's familiar to me, it's very difficult to try to set my mind artificially. But if I put myself into an environment where I am indeed the foreigner, whether it's by ethnicity, language, size, age, all of the above, most of the time, you can be nowhere else but in a beginner's mindset, because anything other than that would be hubris. I know nothing. I am the one that is outside. And photography really is, from how I use it and view it, an outside-in perspective. I am on the outside viewing in, and I am connecting with the people and subjects that I am working with. And it allows me to really think about, what are they thinking? How are they connecting? What might they do? Where is this dynamic going to go? Not, oh, I've seen this all before. The guy's going to come out of the subway. He's going to go over to the bus stop. He's going to hail a cab. This isn't New York City. This is like some very different environment with people that did not grow up the way I did, in parts of the world with troubles I would never know. And I just find it's sort of a key to business and life and photography, Go to your discomfort and you will always grow and you will be ever present.
How does dyslexia impact your photography?
I think that it just mostly is about not needing to use words to define the experiences I had and the people I met. It's about human connection, which I find as a dyslexic is a very easy thing for me to do. It's shocking to me how often I will meet someone and in a moment they will feel complete comfort, which is my intention. It's not a manipulative thing. And I know this to be true about you too, Gil. It's something that is one of your strengths. And I know that comes from dyslexia. And so there's a reason I don't do sunset pictures and animals. I connect with people. And I think that if I were on the spectrum, perhaps I would not be making that choice. If I were someone who needs to more introverted, who did not like connecting with people, I might choose animals. I could go all, or I could do abstract. Certainly don't want to take pictures of myself, but I love to photograph what I connect with and have people connect in a way that tells a full story. In fact, one of my rules in photography is if I see something interesting, I will not take a picture of it unless I can create a fascinating, interesting composition with juxtapositions that say something about this interesting person, event, or thing. Right? I'm not here to memorialize what someone else could already see. I'm not a documentarian.
Right.
I am using it as an art form. I am using it as a storytelling. I want to connect, but not connect just to say, isn't that lovely? You were in Oaxaca and there's people in Oaxaca. Not at all. I want you to be like, this transcends time and place, and it seems surreal. And I feel connections. I feel if you don't feel something, then I've done nothing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Art should provoke an emotion. And so my approach is very different. But again, it's all the power of communication that if I try to write this, it wouldn't come out nearly as well. And I'm lucky we can speak well because at least I can explain this somewhat.
Right.
But the picture does the 1,000 words for me, which is why I chose that as my art form.
I love something that you wrote that sort of goes into this idea of failure begets success. Would you talk a little bit about how do you embrace failure as part of the road to finding successes?
Yeah, it really has two components. One is if you haven't failed, you haven't tried. So I always mock the people who go snow skiing and they come from the top of the mountain to the bottom and they look so perfect. And their ski jackets are just perfect. And their skis are, nothing's on them. And they go, that was a great run. And I would say, you haven't skied. And they look at me like, what are you talking about? I said, had you skied, you would have tested your edges and you would have fallen. Now you skied. So I actually think that it's an important part that you actually seek to find your edges and your failure points. And then the second part is success is sort of like scent, like going back to pedal. Pedal doesn't give a room a great scent. It eliminates scent. But we never talk about, have you noticed that wonderful absence of scent? We only talk about it stinks like hell or, oh my God, this smells great.
Right.
Success is the absence of smell. Failure is where you pay attention. It's where you realize, what have I done wrong? What could I do better? And then the next part, it's a testing ground. Are you resilient? Do you stand up again? Or is this defined you, right? I failed, therefore I'm a failure? No. Stand up, beginner's mindset, begin again. You can do this. Be thankful for the failure. Embrace it as if it were your choice. New day, start over.
How old were you when you were diagnosed with dyslexia?
I was 49.
Oh, so we're young.
Yeah. That would be 7 years ago. Wow. And it happened, the reason I finally found out was that I had a dear friend from college where we both went to a top 10 school, Duke University, and had always done well, but had always struggled in certain areas. And the two of us struggled in the same areas. And we had all of these things that had gone undiagnosed our whole life. Our penmanship was terrible. Our ability to remember names and titles and all the things you know about dyslexia were just awful, to the point where we each often felt stupid, but had objective reason to know we were not stupid. Well, this person went on to become the dean of a major law school and then decided to finally find out what's he struggling with. And had read a book that, because I'm dyslexic, I'm not going to remember the name of the author or the title right now, even though I had time to prepare. I can't recall. And I read the book, and it was me. And I read the test, and it was me. And I took them, and it was me. But my friend pointed out, he said, I kind of hate you, even though we're best friends. And he said it jokingly, of course. He goes, because we both got all of the things that go with dyslexia, except you, David, got all the gifts. He did not. And we read and figured out I used to be I am still, I'm one of the few dyslexics that has a nice library behind me. I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but most people who are dyslexic who meet me, like, I never see dyslexics with a library behind them, with books behind them, because they don't read. But reading for me from a very young age was an escape. And it turns out I now know that I had rewired my brain to go into a very certain part of my head. I hear a voice read to me very quickly. And I go to that same place when I do law or finance. It actually takes away all of my emotion, though. I lose affect, like you wouldn't want to be around me when I'm reading, working on law or finance. But it's how I got there, and it's why I never knew I was stumbling, because I was succeeding by re-networking my brain.
When did it click to you that dyslexia can be a positive rather than a negative? Was there a moment in the last, 5-7 years that you kind of like realize it's a gift, it's an asset?
Yeah, I have to say that I recognized it was an asset as soon as I could explain away my liabilities. So when my friend told me about this book and about having dyslexia, and it all clicked. Like, I had gotten to a point where I thought I had an early onset of dementia, because it's like, how is it possible? Like just here in the podcast where I've read a book, I know to say it, and I cannot for the life of me tell you the title or the author. If my penmanship is horrific, I spell using spell check, words I use every day, I still don't know how to spell them. And so it was causing me depression. I really would have moments of, I'm sorry, I need a minute, because I would just get so down. So as soon as I was able to explain that, I was like, oh my gosh, that liability just left my life. I'm like, yes, I have dyslexia. I'm so excited about this. And then when I understood what the strengths were, it's not like they were new to me. I was always aware that I somehow would see dots that other people didn't even know exist, forget connecting them, that I was able to walk into buildings. I do a lot of restoration and spatially understand everything that's happening, or hear an argument and then take it in a logical way that other people would not have solved the problem in that way. I just never knew where it came from.
Right.
And as soon as I understood, I was like, oh, I'm leaning into this. And in fact, dyslexia has actually given me comedic exits where if I make a mistake, I have a convenient excuse. I'm so sorry. I'm dyslexic. And on the strengths, it's given me more humility. It's not like this is something that you can cultivate, although you can accentuate it. I acknowledge I am very fortunate. I have a gift that allows me to see and think in a different way. And I am grateful.
I know a lot of folks struggle at school, higher education, and the education system often is not really designed to deal or know how to deal with neurodiverse minds. With all that said, you have, not one degree, but 2 degrees. How did you manage through those years dealing with higher education and working within that framework?
Looking back, I recognize I'll go to law school because there was a dichotomy to law school, in that if you saw me in the classroom and saw me argue or participate in any type of program or class discussion, you would know I knew what I was talking about. And when I took the test, it was always a handwritten blue book that you had to fill. And you only take one test a year. Your whole grade comes down to one blue book that you hand wrote. Well, my penmanship is horrific to begin with. My spelling is atrocious, but I had no idea that, of course, as I've explained, that I was dyslexic. And I would get grades that did not reflect my capability, my acumen, what I presented, to the point where the dean of the law school right after I left was one of my favorite professors. When he saw one of my grades, he was just like, how's this possible? How's this possible? Because I know you're better than that. And it was an interesting commentary because I look back, I'm wondering how many times have I handicapped myself by being obligated to handwrite? Had I known I was dyslexic, they would have allowed me to type it. And if I could have typed it, the spelling would have still been off because it couldn't have a spell check. But at least they could have read it and they would have known what I thought. And so where I've done poorly, knowing that I had studied, I now can see the handwriting connection and the spelling connection and appreciate how much I tortured the professors who had to read this. And where I did well, it was often because it wasn't a handwritten test, and it was more based on what I was able to present orally. And I'm a bit precocious and I don't mind speaking. And so I think I compensated really well. Like in high school, I don't know how I made it through the English classes. I never learned grammar. I never learned how to spell. I never learned how to write. I got an F- on my very first paper at Duke University because it was an obligatory writing course where the teacher gave me a book. Of course, I'm not going to remember the title, but gave me a book, told me to go home, do all of the lessons, not to show up for 2 full weeks because I obviously never learned how to write. And she was right. I hadn't. And from there, I ended up getting an A+ in that class, but I still had to handwrite things and didn't always get the best grades.
Yeah, I over the last 20 years that I've been doing all this work with dyslexia and changing the narrative and turning it from a disability to a hyperability, so many people in my near family, my community, and people that are, in their senior years of life, or, they actually be like, I never realized I'm dyslexic. Like what you're talking about, how you explaining it, it's exactly how I think and see the world. So it'd be interesting to find out. Nonetheless, an F- is pretty creative. I haven't heard of that yet. So even with that, it's pretty creative. Yeah.
That was a stunning day for me because I just had never had anything below like a B+ up to that point in my life. I was like, oh my goodness. I laughed before I cried because I was just in disbelief.
I mean, who knew it's possible? Who knew it's possible? But again, failure is the road to success. So the contrast is what we're always looking for, What kind of advice would you give someone who is struggling within the educational system that has dyslexia?
This is someone who knows that they're struggling with it?
Yeah.
It's the same advice I give adults now who've also similarly have had a response to hearing me be so open and honest about it that they've gone to test themselves on different things across all of neurodiversity. And what it is be humble and find humor. Don't hide it. Don't think that somehow you're going to be able to compensate for things that are not something you can compensate for. I'm going to go back to just the simple concept. I write morning pages every single day. I write it with a phone in my hand to look up the same words. I sometimes have to look up the different variations of there, THEREEIR and EY''RE, whatever they are, and see I'm struggling now. I understand that should be simple. I understand I should know it. There's dyslexia where I put a word into a word, and I'm going to call it out. Mm-hmm. And it's harder when you're young, but it's also something done right with a good sense of humor that people will respect. I had a different handicap that's not going to be as obvious from a podcast, is that I was extremely short. I was less than 5 feet all the way up to my senior year of high school, and I only got to 5'5" when I was a sophomore in college. I could have been one of those people who was a shrinking little, don't look at me kid. And instead, I became Mighty Mouse. I just lived up, not Napoleon, not little big man, Mighty Mouse. Make it fun. And people really did respect it and would often not think of me as short, but think of me as confident. And I think for people who are younger in educational system, call out your handicap, get the help I wish I had, go get it. It's available to you. And don't look at it as a weakness. Look at it as an opportunity to have other strengths that people don't.
Well said. What has been the reaction of fellow dyslexics to your journey?
I think a little bit of shock, mostly around the library, the love of reading. and the fact that I am actually reading is my primary form of learning, which definitely blows people away.
Right.
And you included, I can see. It's just like, that's impossible. And it is just because I am one of those people that did rewire my brain in a way that I read in a very different place, extremely effective for me. Like there's a scene in The Matrix where Neo gets a download of how to fly a helicopter, and you see him go, gets in the helicopter and he can fly, or kung fu. I feel like that when I read. And so that's the only part that gets them where they're like, that doesn't make sense. What gives here? But all the rest, they're like, oh, it's totally been my experience. I have to look into this. Or if they know, I wish I had your superpower of reading too. That would have been helpful.
From your perspective, how can we make it easier for dyslexic to thrive in business? Any guidance around that? I know we talked a lot about it throughout our talk today, but any specific takeaways that we may help some of our entrepreneurial colleagues or people that are working in business to sort of manage their dyslexia with others and share it?
Well, in a corporate environment, I think you have a lot more opportunities to find your weaknesses. Entrepreneurial environments, I think, is like a beautiful platform for exhibiting our strengths. And there's a reason that there's such an enormous percentage of entrepreneurial leaders that are dyslexic, because the skill sets that are essential fall in line with the strengths that we naturally are wired to have. So I still always revert back to the same rule. And I use this for all things that cause us anxiety. So if you're going to have a hard conversation and you're worried that you're going to tear up either out of anger or sadness or hurt, call it out. I want you to know that if I cry, it's because I'm angry and I don't know how to hold those emotions back. So you're going to see it, but take it as my intensity, not as my weakness. Same with dyslexia. I understand I just put a word in there that seems like a total non sequitur, and I agree. If I weren't dyslexic, I would have said this word, but I am. So let's get back to where we started, and just really be authentic, transparent. It puts the other side in a place of mad respect, a little bit of surprise, and that humility gives you grounds for connecting. We're not in a world, or should not be in a world, where like you're being mocked for acknowledging your truth. And if you are, you should consider your environment. That's kind of toxic.
What a strong advice, because it's so important to own it, and then it takes the power of the shame or of the labeling from the other side, and allows to really kind of be who we are, but also own it. Sometimes I'll say a word, or my son always, obviously English not my first language, if you can't tell because of my accent, but sometimes because of my background, different culture, different languages, I come up with sentences that don't make any English sense because I'm translating it from other modalities, from other parallels, from other, framework. But often they're more interesting, because it's that sort of beginner's mind. It's like the other person's like, wait a second, what? It's like, but they get the point because it's fresh for them, and they can kind of experience the point in a slightly different way than if I use the more traditional, the more common, the more cliche reference or framework,
That's what I also love about being able to make connections to dots that other people don't even see, and using the combination word non sequitur. I'll often inject a total non sequitur. It could be a cartoon. It could be a song lyric. It could be a creative image where I'll put something up and say, that's what I mean. And bringing people to the appreciation of how is this esoteric thing on point, and watching that epiphany where it hits. It happens quicker, faster, with you, more impactful. And they would never have gotten there if you took the traditional linear way of trying to explain things, which is boring. Mm-hmm. Let's just bring them to the knowledge.
I love that. So, David, what's coming up next for you? What are you excited about?
Excited about two things that should happen before the end of the month. One, which puts me at a point of not having full control of my future, which is whether or not P&G chooses us as a partner. If they do, that would definitely be something that adds rocket fuel to an already exciting venture. And the other is I'm going to Mexico City to pursue my passion in photography. And Christy and I are going there. I have a dear friend named Carlos, who is a photographer and a journalist. And we've been walking and shooting together throughout Mexico since 2009. And I'm just going to take a few days and completely leave everything else behind. Christy will stay in a beautiful hotel while I go into the grit of the city and meet real people with a language that I only speak haltingly, and my camera with my friend Carlos. And very excited about that.
Beautiful. Well, David, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. So inspiring. I really thank you for coming on.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for having me. Love to do it anytime you want to have a good talk. I love it.
If you enjoyed our conversation today, be sure to subscribe to this series wherever you get your podcasts and follow along on Instagram at Dyslexic Design Thinking. You can also drop us a line at dyslexia@gershoni.com to receive our monthly newsletter and learn about our upcoming programming. Dyslexic Design Thinking is produced by Gershoni Creative. Until next time, be well.